Now, for today's show, our guest is someone I connected with only recently. I reckon it was about a week ago, through a mutual connection on LinkedIn. A fellow supporter she is of Men and Boys Health. She reached out and said, Rae, you have to speak to this man. He's doing incredible work and he's an absolute force. And when someone sends a recommendation like that, I listen, and I'm glad I did. His journey is one that spans aviation, Antarctica, men's groups, poetry, and now fatherhood. He's the founder of Solid Foundations Counselling and the Good Uncle Project. He brings a wealth of lived experience, professional insight, and heart to the work he does. Sean Menere, welcome to the show.
Wow, what an introduction.
It's
Thanks,
beautiful,
Rae.
Isn't it?
Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, I remember, like, that was just right off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I didn't write any of it.
That's pretty impressive, actually. I have to meet this guy.
Now, I was saying to you just before we went on air, I said, how do you actually pronounce your surname? Because when I Googled it to tell me how to say it, they said it was Menere. And now, like, that's classic Australian code for yeah, nah, yeah.
Yeah, there tends to be a few extra syllables thrown in there as well. So, yeah, no, it's it's Menere, yep.
Bit more posh than yeah, nah.
Yeah.
Now, not long after we became connected on the old LinkedIn, you wrote me a very lovely email of introduction, which was the push for me to get straight back to you. And I do love good manners and curious initiative. And you clearly know how to write, because what you described in that first email and the subsequent one had me absolutely captivated. So what inspired you to go to all the effort to contact me?
You're doing amazing work, obviously, in the men's health space, which is something that I've been passionate about for a long time. So after I was introduced by our mutual friend, it was kind of a no-brainer to get in touch. And, yeah, I like to do the courtesy of acknowledging the work that you're doing and, yeah, formalise things rather than just sliding into your DMs. It was like, okay, let's do this properly. It was more of a considered, extension of this is what I'm doing. I love what you're doing. Let's have a chat.
It's such a lovely thing to do. It's really very community. I think the way that people are now sort of turning a little bit more from this very informal texting and, as you said, sliding into the DMs. I'm finding that more and more that people are connecting, wanting to connect face to face and not over Zoom. Yeah. So I think, we're really thawing out after that long, cold, hard spell we had of COVID.
Yeah, for sure. And the in-person dynamic is obviously, like, particularly speaking with a fellow counsellor, you appreciate the value of the face-to-face dynamic.
Well, that's why I'm here today. I want some counselling of my own. Thank you very much.
We'll see what we can do. We've got time. Yeah. I think there's a digital fatigue that's attached to a lot of things these days. So it is nice to catch up, even if it's with friends, catching up for a coffee and those sorts of things. It's anything's better than a text message. So.
Well, yeah, although they are pretty handy when you want to get something done.
Yeah, there's definitely a time and a place, yeah.
Yeah. So just to kick off the show before we get into the real guts of things, which I know is going to get pretty deep, tell me, where are you in life at the moment?
It's a good question. It's one I haven't had a chance to really ask myself recently, because it's been pretty reactive given the new entry into fatherhood and running a small business and everything that comes with both of those. So,
what time frame is that? The birth of a business and the birth of a child?
Pretty close quarters. Yeah, really going full time on my private practice. Kicked off for the same, last year, and our baby girl arrived at the end of last year. So it's been pretty intense, paying appropriate attention to both of those things at the moment, and myself and my partner and everything else that comes with that. So, at the moment I feel like we're getting into a state that is a little bit more sustainable, less reactive, able to enjoy the work that we've put in so far. So, feeling like the hard work is starting to pay off, and not so much sinking, which it definitely felt like at times, particularly the end of last year was pretty rough.
When was your daughter born?
The end of September.
So you've got two births, essentially.
Yeah.
Was it difficult? Because, I mean, both probably required your utmost attention and being prioritised.
Yeah.
How difficult was that?
It's one of the most difficult things that I've had to go through. It's the work that is required for both on their own is significant, and being able to work out a way to juggle both is something I don't want to replicate anytime soon, but something I was very conscious of at the time. So there was a compartmentalisation element of things. There was a fierce prioritisation exercise at play, knowing that first and foremost my family is the ultimate priority. I need to work out a way to support that, and I need to look after myself at the same time, otherwise none of that's possible. So yeah, definitely a balancing act. Glad that we were able to get through it, and now it forms part of the evidence that I'll be able to look back at when things get tough again and go, hang on, you got through that. So
which bit are you most proud of during that moment?
The fact that it all worked. I think, because there were times there where it was like, I don't actually know how this is going to play out.
Can you describe a literal moment?
There were moments where, just after Evelyn, our baby girl, was born, within those first 4 to 6 weeks, and I'm essentially trying to work out how to do this parenthood thing and try to work out how to support a family, and very little, if any, income coming in, and just trying to tell myself that you'll find a way, because you always have found a way, without any clue in terms of what that would look like. It was just that belief that I'd find the people I needed to, I'd learn the things that I needed to, I'd develop the skills that I needed to. But yeah, just to find yourself randomly in tears at times because it was that hard, and not really knowing why, but being totally overwhelmed with everything, and just accepting that was part of it.
Did that knowledge of just knowing you'd get through come from digging into your unconscious mind where you've been there before?
Yeah, without a doubt. The fact that I've got definitive points of reference to refer back to, where life got unbelievably difficult and I had to find a way to get through to the other side of that. And yeah, there were times where that wasn't always certain, and yeah, still managed to get there. So
especially when you're at that intersection of wanting to support your family emotionally, but you also have to support them financially with your other baby that is still, being birthed. That was, that would have had to have taken priority, I guess, at times to build that. Yeah,
at times for sure. I gave myself a couple of months after Evie was born to be with my girls and make sure that everything was okay at home, and we have limited support in Melbourne, so that made things even more difficult.
What support do you have in Melbourne?
We've got a couple of friends around.
Right, okay.
But yeah, that was mostly the extent of it. We had family come and go briefly, but it was mostly on us to work our way through it, which was difficult in itself. But yeah, and then it was after hours work. It was a lot of work under extreme fatigue and then it was understanding that there's always something to do with a small business. So whenever I had some downtime, whenever the girls were in bed, I could get to it. So
one of the obvious questions that come to mind is why all of that all at once?
Good question. It was the nature of the circumstances to an extent. I have wanted to venture into the counselling space full time for some time. I've been involved in the men's group space in Melbourne for over 6 years now, and that's always been something that I've been very passionate about. And after getting back from Antarctica for the second time last year, or at the start of last year, we were pregnant, so we had a time cap. And my partner suggested we go and visit her mum, who was in Spain at the time. And the only real way to facilitate that was to resign from the job that I was doing. And that seemed to be the perfect segue into going full-time on the counselling thing. So
in theory, did that feel pretty exciting?
Yeah, and terrifying. So, but it was like, okay, if we're going to do this, then let's go all in. Because I can do that. Like, I can work with that. I can commit to what's required there without really knowing at the time. Did you get help
through advice on how to set up a business? And
yeah, so the counsellor that I'd been seeing regularly for the last 5 years, he moved into a mentor role for me. So that to have access to that was probably the single biggest factor in the confidence to go with it. He helped me with the early stages of getting things set up and helping with the logistics and referring his client overflow and those sorts of things. So that was a game changer. Like, that gave me the confidence to be like, okay, well, he's in my corner. He believes I can do this. I believe at some level I can do this. Otherwise I wouldn't be.
Yeah.
So let's do it.
What was it about you that he thought that you could do it?
I've been meaning to ask him that question. I don't really know. Like, we've worked together obviously very closely for a long period of time. He's seen my evolution personally and professionally, and the work ethic, the self-belief and everything that I've been able to develop over that period of time. So yeah, there was clearly something in him that made him feel like it was worthwhile. And I mean, he hasn't gotten anything out of it. It was just, something that, he wanted to do off his own bat. So it's a pretty good feeling to know someone's in your corner without any agenda, without, just purely to support you.
And that has your back.
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And which is formed the basis for my counselling practice too. It's like, okay, I want to be in someone else's corner.
Yeah. It's a really, really good foundation to have, and I know that's the name of your business.
Yeah.
It just came to my mind. In fact, speaking of names, when you mentioned your daughter's name, my granddaughter's name is Evelyn, and I just remember Rose and Josh took so long to choose this name.
Yeah.
And when it came, it was like, there it is, and she's Evelyn. So it's like, no, there can't be another one. Surely she's the only Evelyn that ever existed.
I'm sure she's very much her own person, for sure.
Oh, yes. She's in the UK at the moment.
Yeah, right.
So she's travelled from London to Scotland and back again in the space of what feels like about a week. And so I just saw some photos this morning. She's at the Paddington exhibition and she loves Paddington. So
very good. Yeah. We've been able to get Evie on a plane a few times already. So I have no doubt she'll be bouncing around the world in no time. Oh, well, yeah.
Do you find that we were talking about generations before, and how we're very lucky that, you and I are different parts of this particular generation, but we're very lucky to have, as you described it, seen vinyl go again, come back a few times. But kids and travelling, it's still a kind of a new thing, travelling with very young kids, and the negative responses that you get from people about what a waste of an airfare, they're never going to remember anything, good luck with a screaming baby on a plane, all of those things, they're all very untrue, aren't they?
Yeah, I think, and people tend to project their own thoughts and experience and onto yourself, but that's just a natural thing. But they don't, the value in having children experience new things and new people and places and those experiences. I mean, for me as an adult, like I appreciate the value that I've had in travel. So to get the family on a flight seems like a no-brainer for me, but it's not easy. I think that's probably where people are coming from. Yeah, it's not easy to do anything with small children necessarily.
No.
But it's recognising the investment in the struggle, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's an experience, and also something that builds resilience over time, because guess what? When your child gets into teenage years, it's not always that easy.
No.
In fact,
I can't imagine.
If you can get yourself mentally and physically prepared early on, and not to say that, teenage years are really, really as bad as they feel and look, it's just that I don't think that parents are often prepared for it.
Yeah, no, with working with the parents that I work with professionally, I see that all the time, and it's difficult because, and even the high school mentoring I'm doing at the moment, it's been a really interesting insight into the teenage world as it is right now. Which is a lot for everybody, I think.
You've touched on a couple of things like air traffic controlling and Antarctica, which we're going to save up for other parts of the show. But tell me about the high school mentoring, and in alignment with, say, something like the Netflix documentary, not to be confused, the Netflix series, not to be confused as a documentary. How does that sort of level up for you in what you're seeing? Yeah,
early on, obviously starting the counselling private practice, I wasn't seeing clients full time, so it was an opportunity to see what else I could do when the other groups that I could spend some time with and learn about. And being involved with teenagers again was kind of a no-brainer for me, because I've got some young nephews, and they're probably a few years off getting to that stage, but that's going to come around pretty quickly. So it was a good opportunity to reach out to the Race Foundation and get involved with the
Race
Foundation, and get involved with their volunteer program, and work in a high school for, it'll be a 20-week program by the end of it in a couple of weeks' time, and I guess seeing the conversations that teenagers are having. I think around the adolescence program itself, there's probably I've had more discussion with parents than I have with the teenagers around that series, because it's really brought into the spotlight the themes that are kind of going on, I guess, behind the scenes that parents maybe haven't been fully aware of, and so it presented some pretty challenging things for a lot of people.
What are you seeing in the boys themselves, though? What's coming out of them most commonly?
It's typical boy things, like they're looking for connection, they're looking to be understood and heard, and that is difficult at times, particularly where they don't have peer groups and things that they feel like they're a part of. So the isolation is definitely there, and they're looking for connection online. And it's a matter of how that's monitored, or how involved parents are with that side of things.
Why isn't there connection outside of online?
I think the skills are lacking. Like, I think we've lost a lot of the ability to communicate, just in those practical skills. If you're not involved in team sport and things like that, it can be quite difficult. Personality traits tap into that as well. But a lot of the communication is online, so it's a different
But isn't
means.
Communication taught and it's role modelled? So I would go back to, we put so much weight on the online thing that's all to do with online, but how are boys being raised? And we're talking about boys here. Girls can come into this conversation too, but how are showing boys how to communicate? How are we showing them to self-care? How are we showing them all of these things that they need to know? Because quite often parents are very involved in online as well, and may not be as curious and present for their children. So maybe move away from what's going on online to what's not happening in raising boys.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's a difficult conversation to have, because it requires parents to have a look at, hey, what am I doing? How is my child behaving, and what contribution am I making to that? In families where you've got two working parents and those sorts of things, and the living situation isn't easy at the moment, and arguably it's never been easy, but there are challenges unique at the moment that people are struggling with, and if the attention isn't on the family unit, it's there are consequences to that. I heard someone recently talk about the inconvenient truth, and it is, if we're not modelling the behaviour that we kind of want from our children, then it's difficult for them to find it anywhere else.
And being curious about them.
Yeah.
My life is pretty hectic. It's a 7-day-a-week job that I have, but making space for your kids, for my kids, is always a priority. I have one that lives in London, I have one who's a parent, and I have a 16-year-old. And yesterday I had so much to do, including writing this show. But my 16-year-old, he was home with me, and I said, let's go and do something together. And so we went. We had 2 games of bowling, and then they could throw in mini golf as well at Holy Moly. So we did that as well. And then we went shopping for some tech for me, because I needed some tech stuff for my business. And we had a lot of fun doing that. And then we got home and he did some study and then set up all of my new tech for me. And then by the time we had dinner and everything, I went off and wrote my show, and he went and spent the rest of his night online with his friends. That's balance.
Yeah.
And that's real connection. We had connection with people all throughout the day. So we can have 2 things at once. And guess what? He shut his bedroom door as well.
Yeah.
Being online and having his door shut means something very, very different in our household. And that's about privacy and respect, not the only thing that he's doing.
Yeah. And it's such a good point. The balance thing is unique to any dynamic, but you've got to spend the time finding out what it looks like. And this week we went to the aquarium for the first time, and it was like, okay, put the laptop away, put the phone away, and just be there for a couple of hours and just enjoy the opportunity we have to get out of the house for a little bit. And even when we're at home, like the number of times where Evie's up and about and she's crawling around now, and it's a lot of fun, and I'm doing something on the laptop for work, and it's like, hang on a second, put it away. Like, it's more important to be there. You can get back on the computer when she's having a nap, hopefully. But
Never.
But at some point you can get back on the laptop and do the work. And it's something that I prioritize. I realize that it's not the same for a lot of people, and there are various reasons behind that, but for me it's important, and for my family it's important. So it's not easy, because there's a lot of things that need to be done, but there's always time to get those things done.
Do you think your generation of parenting are just so much more aware of the dangers of social media and smartphone addiction?
Yeah, I think because we've grown up and seen it go from one extreme to the other. We grew up with landlines, and then now we're on smartphones and everything in between. I think there's a greater level of awareness there. It's difficult as well, I suppose, with the screen time to manage that. I think the generation of parents that are starting to come through now are realising that, hey, we've got a few years worth of data here that suggests that putting your kid in front of a screen, like at all, particularly early on, is going to be detrimental longer term. So it's worth doing the hard yards early on to get that return on investment further down the track. So, yeah.
And it's there to stay, and it's there for a reason. It's part of our evolution. We human beings typically will create more comfort and more convenience as we move along. And, the last show I did was about AI, and it was the same sort of thing, that it's a balance of stuff that we need to be role modelling to our kids, to show them and involve them in other kinds of communications and other kinds of activities, which takes time. It doesn't necessarily take financial investment. If you live lucky enough to live here in Melbourne, Victoria, there are stacks and stacks of free things, green things to run around in here that cost you absolutely nothing but time.
Yeah, and the community programs, the local council initiatives and things like that, it's phenomenal. Like, I think we didn't appreciate just how much was out there until Evie turned up, and we were introduced to this entire world of things that are available, and services and support that's there. So,
In fact, before we go to the break, I have to tell a story about community. I just posted, it was my last Men's Health Week post today. I've been doing my own posting every day, as well as posting for Global Action on men's health. So I'm on two ends of the time spectrum here, but it was about community, this post. And my hairdresser, she is local here. She's in Blackburn. And she was telling me a story a few months ago about a gentleman who brings his wife in every single week to have a wash and set, and she has dementia. And it's been for years that he's been bringing her, and my hairdresser, whose name is Rose, it's my daughter's name as well, she was saying, just watching the decline of this woman, but how this man is just so dedicated and devoted to his wife. Anyway, about a year ago, another gentleman brings his wife in who's also got dementia. And so Rose thought, wow, here's an opportunity. Here's a community opportunity. So over a bit of time, she managed to sync their appointments up so that these men have now connected. So every week, these men get an hour together sitting on Rose's beautiful couch in her hairdressing salon and have a conversation. It must be the hardest time of their lives to be going through.
Yeah.
And we so often just disregard our aged community. But thank you to Rose.
Yeah.
She's brought these guys together, and
what a beautiful awareness to see that opportunity and make it happen, and then to see it happen, and the value in that.
How much did that cost?
Yeah, zero.
Nothing.
Just a bit of attention. Yeah.
And I've got goosebumps just thinking about it, but that is such a real story.
Yeah, amazing.
So now I've got something special for you, Sean.
Okay.
It's that time of the show where I've coined, it's the very special guest song request.
Right.
So it's a moment's break where I have a bit of fun queuing up a song from your selection, and you have to guess it from my very cryptic clue.
Okay.
Which one it is.
Okay.
So it could be the song title, it could be the artist,
right.
It could be anything really that's coming out of me.
Okay.
The clue is something that's common in the Antarctica.
Birds.
Are they common?
Yeah.
All right. It's not that though.
Okay. No rain.
That's it.
Yeah, nice.
Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
Yes. I thought you would get that straight away.
No.
But you've also given away one of the other songs.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of people that sing songs about birds, so that could be anything.
Yeah.
By Blind Melon.
Yeah.
What's that about for you?
It's just one of those great songs, I think, that it wasn't until I fell in love with it that I actually worked out what it was about. And it's about someone struggling with some mental health issues and wishing that they had someone there that would just be there for them. So, but it's kind of upbeat and cheery at the same time. So I kind of like the juxtaposition there, I suppose.
Yeah, and what a big word to use on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, I'm good for one of those. Yeah.
What a great segue into the next segment as well. We are going to jump really deep into some of the more heavy themes that you want to speak about, that's going to help people understand what it really feels like being you and what it might feel like being them. So don't go away. Here is No Rain by Blind Melon. Welcome back. The time is just 33 minutes past 10 and you're tuned into 94.1 FM 3WBC with Rae Bonney, joined in the studio by Sean Menere, counsellor, father and passionate men's health practitioner and advocate. What does it feel like being you today, Sean?
Today it feels pretty good. I feel well rested for the first time in as long as I can remember.
Did you get a good sleep last night?
I did, and it's been a while. I'm kind of, as I say, appropriately caffeinated and well rested. So we're good to go.
And a radio star now. Officially, add that to your resume.
Yeah, put it on my LinkedIn. Yep.
This will be all over LinkedIn, by the way.
Okay, good to know.
You will be famous. But straight from the horse's mouth, you sent me a few pointers about things you'd like to speak about. So shall we just start ticking them off?
Yeah, let's go.
Now, you disclose being bullied as a child and how this experience instilled in you a desire to advocate for those who are unable to stand up for themselves. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about the how, what, why, where and when of that? I mean, I probably most of the way through primary school, it was just a theme. I've always been a little smaller than my peers, so it seemed like a fairly natural thing to be the target for some people for some reason. But that wasn't great. Early on, lunchtime was just wrestling matches with kids, and I'd walk back into the classroom with no buttons left on my shirt, and that kind of went on for a little while, and then we moved from Victoria to Brisbane when I was 7, and that was
that was not an easy period of time. And then being the new kid in a new school, starting halfway through the school year or towards the end of the school year, that was pretty isolating. And so that it was not so much the physical stuff at that point. It was more, kids would spend their lunchtime just running away from you because that was their idea of entertainment. And so that went on for a while too. So, yeah, it was a pretty rough period of time for a while. And then, yeah, things kind of leveled out later in primary school, and then you transition from primary school to high school. It's like, well, here we go again. But bigger kids with with bigger agendas, I suppose. And yeah, it was pretty rough. It definitely took its toll. Thankfully, meeting mates that I'm still friends with now at some point along that road helped things to stabilise a little bit. And yeah.
Was there any help for you during that time?
It was limited. Mum and Dad did the best they could, as they do, but the school system didn't do a great job, given that it was the 90s and things were a bit different back then. And I remember one particular incident where the school bully, the class bully, he was a big kid. There was a whole lot of behavioural issues that were being managed behind the scenes. He actually roundhouse kicked me to the head and pretty much knocked me out in the playground. And in the aftermath of that, there wasn't any real repercussions because there were all of these justifications for his behaviour. And I know Mum and Dad were ropeable, as you can imagine, and just didn't feel protected, and that's a pretty rough thing as an 11, 12-year-old kid.
Because the world is endless then, isn't it, in the world that you know? Yeah,
if you can't feel safe at school and you in spite of your parents' best efforts to try to facilitate that, it's like, well, I need to be on guard here all the time. Like that's the protective strategy that you come up with. So you learn other ways to cope and enter the people pleaser phase where if you can be everyone's friend, at least you weren't going to get kicked in the head. Like that's where you go with it,
and that's where you went with it.
I think it made it pretty clear that if I was to avoid physical damage, then I needed to make sure that I was on good terms with everybody. That I feel like retrospectively that's the defensive strategy that I came up with that worked arguably for some time, and then you grow up and you keep that strategy and it doesn't work anymore, and then it calls into question everything you're doing. So then everything falls apart again and you've got to come up with another strategy that works. So
it's a tricky one. Is that why you came onto the show so quickly? Yes, I'll come, I'll be there.
No, it's just good timing. I had Sunday morning off, let's go. I'll have this conversation.
Not making light of that though, but it is, thank goodness you did have that strategy that kept you as safe as you could possibly be. But as you said, they tend to linger and impact further on in life. And a lot of the self-reflection I've done's picked up these old patterns that were developed really early on as things to keep me safe that don't work anymore. And a lot of the work that I do with the men that I work with is like, what kept you safe as a kid, and what are you still using there that's outdated and that isn't working for you anymore? And let's have a look at that, because if you can understand that, then you can kind of free yourself of that and come up, and then we can talk about different strategies that are available. And this experience that you had also not only gave you some clarity about what had happened with you and how that was playing out later in life, but it's inspired you to do better for others that will be experiencing that now.
Absolutely. And my nephews have been a big part of that too, right? Like knowing, you've got two young boys that are coming up through primary school now, and they will face times where things that are rough, and to be able to model behaviour for them, to be able to have a relationship with them that they can approach you and talk to you about whatever they feel like they need to at any point, and you're still somewhat removed from the immediate family dynamic, is really important, so that they having that voice where I didn't probably feel like I had that level of support is really important for starters. And then, to be a voice for those that don't have a voice has always been a big thing for me, because I felt like I didn't have a voice for a long time.
And it's probably a good segue into, it wasn't planned, but the Good Uncle Project, which is completely coined by, and well done. I had a look at the website. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a little bit emotional reading through it, but tell us about that.
I went through the lockdown period in Melbourne was obviously
endless.
For starters. But it presented an opportunity for me that I became aware of really early in the piece. I was going through a marriage breakdown at the time, and divorce was an ongoing process, and I became aware early on that if I didn't sit down and sort my life out during this time, whatever that looked like, then I was going to get to a point down the track that I wish I did. So I picked up journaling again for probably the first time in 10 years or so. And my morning routine centered around getting out early in the morning for your hour worth of outside time at the time, and then coming home and writing for hours. And my counsellor at the time, I kind of floated the idea of writing my autobiography just as an exercise, and he couldn't be more excited. And he's like, just from a therapeutic point of view, that is an outstanding exercise. So that was kind of the kick I needed to actually start. And it was getting through that I realised that there was some value in it, not just for me, but possibly for my nephews. And it was a matter of, okay, well, how do I curate this in some capacity that is comprehensible and and to make it easier to understand than the random streams of consciousness that I was spitting out at times, and so I did kind of formalize it in the form that is the Good Uncle Project now. So there's still some streams of consciousness there that even I read back on and go, what are you getting at there? But there are other things there, and I document some of the really big life challenges that I've been able to get through, and the lessons that I learnt getting through those. And it's like just a resource now. It's a reference point so that, if someone is going through a tough time, they know, for starters, that they're not alone. There might be some value in the words that are there for somebody, and that it's really, like, it stems from my journaling, so it's really personal. And so it was a little bit scary putting it out there. But it comes back to, look, if there's one person that can find value in this, then it's worth putting out there. My discomfort is worth overcoming to facilitate that.
Has there been feedback that you've received that's validated what you've done?
Yeah. And it's not something that it existed for a couple of years before I actually pulled the trigger and let people know that it was there, because that's how scared I was. And since then, I've had some great feedback from some people close to me that validated in a way that I probably wasn't looking for, but it still feels good to know that it's been well received and there's value in it. So that was the point.
I guess you can rewind to that, small version of yourself, that little version of yourself where you go, well, if I was going to go through that, if I can impact one person's life and make my experience relatable to somebody else, then there's something in that.
It's worth doing. I subscribe to that regularly, like even being here this morning. It's like I don't know where this conversation goes, but if someone listening gets some value out of it, then
we're only like 45 minutes in.
But if someone listening gets something out of it, then that's worth doing.
And even if it's that person's me, which it is already, so your job's already done.
Great, thanks.
But thank you for that Good Uncle Project. Anyone that's listening in, if you want to look it up, you just Google that and Sean Menere and you'll get it.
Or the gooduncleproject.com,
There's nothing else like it, is there?
No, it's its own thing.
Who cares about uncles,
That's it. Well, and that was the thing too. Like for a long time, I'd fully come to terms with the fact that I was likely not going to be a parent. And so, okay, well, how can I be the best uncle that I can be? It's been important, like having a healthy male role model is something that I'm like, well, I need to be that for my nephews. So that's been a big part of it.
In fact, one of my posts this week was about fatherlessness.
I saw that,
men who experience involuntary fatherlessness, and what massive impact that has on men and families and people. Just one of those very hidden, unaddressed issues that men experience. But speaking of uncles and families and things, you also mentioned about the anxious avoidant attachment styles you observed in your parents. How do you think that early modelling impacted the way you approach relationships later in life? It didn't. And you might want to describe anxious avoidant for listeners too. Look, Mum has I've worked out in hindsight that there was an anxious attachment style there, and anxiously attached to you or to each other. To each other, yeah. Oh, and us as kids as well. And I understand where Mum's anxiety comes from, and I've got more awareness around that as an adult. But as a child, you don't. You're just modelling what is modelled for you, and. That's not to say Mum and Dad weren't doing the best they could, and I appreciate everything that they did for me. But it's recognising that these patterns replicate themselves. Dad's avoidance was more. I think we found out later in life that there was perhaps some neurodiversity there that was undiagnosed, that has become more apparent. We received a dementia and Alzheimer's diagnosis for him a few years back, and so that's been its own thing to kind of manage, but it's also helped make a lot of sense to what happened growing up. And so, having an avoidant and an attachment and an anxious attachment style, which is, now that I know and working with couples at the moment, is quite a common combination. But I developed quite an anxious attachment, which was, it taps into the schoolyard bullying stuff around abandonment and things like that as well. And it didn't set me up well. My first, I guess, long-term relationship was probably one of the most traumatic experiences of my life in hindsight. But because I was anxiously attached to that partner, it made things really difficult to navigate. And kind of get to a point where I could put my happiness as a priority in that. But that went pretty bad. It was there was a lot of jealousy there. I didn't know any different, obviously being in my early 20s and it being a new thing, and then got to a point where I realised that it wasn't working, and in an effort to end the relationship, she disclosed that she had cancer. And furthermore, the doctors that she'd spoken to had only given her 6 months to live. And that, in a way, allowed me to justify her behaviour. And that, kind of made an excuse for, okay, well, I guess we better make the most of the next 6 months. I think that's kind of what came up there. And so we did. We travelled. I was going through the selection process for the job as an air traffic controller at the time too, which was intense. Whilst managing this at the same time, and I remember we were in New York, and I received the call offering me a position as a air traffic control trainee, and I just, the answer was yes, but I had no idea how I was going to manage everything that was going to come next. And so signed up for that. Time went by. We had to relocate from Brisbane to Melbourne. It
yeah, that was difficult. She got to Melbourne and you know, apparently had gone through surgery and everything was okay, which, you know, in hindsight doesn't check out. Like, there was nothing congruent about this story. But when you're in it and when the environmental stress is so extreme, you just run with it because it's good news, right? And then, yeah, you get further down the track, you get through air traffic control training somehow. I got posted to Cairns, had been in Cairns maybe 6 months, and things were never great from that point. Like, the relationship still wasn't functional, and I remember vividly, one night sitting on the couch, and she asked me if I was happy, and I remember thinking to myself, if you answer this, you've got to stick with it. Like, you know you're not. You know what's coming. You've got to hang in there. And so I said no, I'm not. And then went through the aftermath of that, which was, it was just extreme. And that, after hours of the emotional outbursts that I was on the receiving end of there and trying to navigate that, things went quiet. I found her in the bathroom. The door was locked. I also found an empty box of Panadol and a number of empty blister packs of paracetamol. I found a couple of notes that had been written. Managed to get her out of the bathroom and get her to the ED. And called her mum in Brisbane, told her she had to get to Cairns as soon as she could. And yeah, when we were discharged from hospital, I remember the look I got from the doctor that discharged her, and he looked at me as if to say, "What did you do that put her in this state?" And that's a really difficult thing to go through. And thankfully, her mum turned up, and I left her in the care of her mother. But what was also hard there is that the response I got from her was like, this wasn't the first time. So yeah, I'd kind of been put in that position. Felt like I was doing the right thing. In lieu of any other option, stuck with it until I couldn't, and then that played out like that. So it did damage. I'm working with men these days that are going through variations of relationships that are causing damage, and it's important to let them know that, hey, you're not on your own here. I hear you, I see you, I understand you. Like, we can get through this.
It's hard to even say the words that men are victims of violence perpetrated by their partners.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, and I could see that was really, I don't know if it was difficult, but I could just see, I've been watching your face as you tell the story.
Yeah, it's something that I've integrated into my story these days, which is, but it's not to say I didn't do damage along the way, and it didn't do damage to subsequent relationships. The healing that's required from that is a long-term thing, and it impacted a number of subsequent relationships. So it didn't just hurt me; it hurt others as well. So that's been the difficult thing to reconcile as well.
Yeah, yeah, because that repeated exposure to that level of abuse. Yeah, which it is. Yeah,
and it's and I learnt that after the fact, obviously, but working with guys that don't realise that is abuse, and
especially men of culture.
Yeah,
who it's just the expectation that their primary life objective is to provide for others at any cost.
Yeah, and then you kind of work them through it, and there's a relief that comes with a lot of them in realising that the way that they're being treated isn't the way they deserve to be treated. And I think it's being able to be there for them in those moments where they realise there's an alternative.
Yeah. I think probably 90 to 95% of my private practice is men in that position.
Mm. Yeah, it's something we're not talking about, which is why it's important for me to talk about.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
No,
and
right.
Also, as we move on, probably you'll provide further examples of how you were able to, be accountable to yourself and how you, not only recovering from, this theme in your life where you're being abused from primary school to high school to relate to your first serious relationship. That's endless.
Yeah, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, because it's what you expect, and then you keep finding it. But yeah, thankfully things are better now. Yeah.
Well, if we go to the other side of things, I mean, that's emotional and physical. In terms of academically, you were probably quite a high achiever.
Yeah.
And a perfectionist in your sort of primary and secondary school. What happened in university?
Yeah, I kind of just lost my way.
Was this all during the same time?
No, the relationship was kind of after the university phase, but I guess that kind of led into it. It was a very brief phase. I did pretty well in high school and kind of got to the point, and then kind of felt like, I did pretty well. I should probably go to university, and without really having any clue of what I wanted to do at that point, which I realised is not unique. And then so I got my first preference at uni, and it was like, yay! And then
to study what?
I was doing a Bachelor of Information Technology, and it was a double degree in a Bachelor of Economics, which, is...
Easy. The easy stuff.
Pretty straightforward. So, yeah, it didn't last long. I didn't have the discipline. Like, the structure around uni is pretty loose, and so, being accountable to my own situation was not something that I developed the skills for. I wasn't suitably motivated anyway. I had all this spare time, so I was enjoying that. But then it was like, but you've also got to study. And then there were subjects that I didn't have any real interest in. So that combination didn't work. So I failed, which was really the first time that objectively that I'd failed at any point, and particularly academically. So it was kind of new territory, but it did make me realise that, hey, this isn't working. Like, I don't want to do this. And so, I pulled the trigger after 18 months. So I decided that I was done, which was the first time I'd been put in that situation as well. Had no idea what I was going to do next. There was if I wasn't studying, then I needed to be working full time. So I had to work out what that looked like. So I was working 4 jobs at one point to kind of make up the hours.
Doing what?
I was a soccer referee. I was working, my first job was at Target as a kid, so I kind of tried to get as many hours as I could there. I was doing some work experience for a business my cousin had, and I was doing some volunteer work in the Mater Children's Hospital. So that was kind of, as I say, making up the hours until I worked out what the hell I was going to do. So I ended up getting a full-time job. It was pretty ordinary, but it was a full-time job. And then, my mum, I was a receptionist.
You weren't going to say that, were you?
I was trying to get through it. It wasn't very long. I was a receptionist, and I was, 19 years old, and I was in an office of 14 women, and I was the receptionist. So it was kind of, that was a great dynamic because I learnt a lot, but I also felt pretty isolated at the same time. And the manager I had was not a pleasant person. So that didn't make it any easier. And I was applying at the time to get into Virgin Blue. My mum actually started with the company when they kicked off back in 2000, and they went through this massive recruitment drive post Ansett collapse, and I threw my hat in the ring.
To do what there?
Just customer service work. And I got the job. I got into Virgin when I was 19.
Wow.
As a part-time check-in agent, and that was the start of my aviation career. And like I went through a phase there post uni dropout and everything where life was very ordinary. Off the back of a fairly confusing time, like teenagehood was not pleasant for me. I struggled. I struggled at home. I struggled at school. I made it work. I was playing soccer, so that kind of was an outlet for me, and I was doing pretty well at that. But yeah, at some point I realised that I was feeling depressed, and so I went into the doctor, and she actually said, "Look, you've got clinical depression. Here's some medication," and which was both a relief and confusing at the same time, because I had a reason for the way I was feeling, which was something that was probably helpful in terms of information, but the medication was not great. And that was off the back of an attempt at self-harm too, which kind of brought things into light pretty overtly. So it was like, okay, well, let's give these things a run, and that might help with where I'm at the moment. But then really it was, and only retrospectively is it clear that the environment was such a massive contributing factor to the way I was feeling. So the job at Virgin was what I needed. Like it was purpose in a way. It was something. Because
you mentioned self-harm in that you didn't want to be here anymore. Self-harm.
Yeah.
That lack of purpose is such a one of the major contributors to male suicide. That lack of purpose, and so quite often, and just a little bit of an insight here, when people are thinking about men who are not travelling well, it's not necessarily a mental health problem. It could be a purpose problem. So trying to push men towards talking, helping and medication, perhaps find out what the issue is, and that might be as simple as just a new job.
Yeah. And again, it's something that I work with my clients with now. It's like, let's work out what's going on in your environment and see if we can start to improve that. And if that helps you feel better, then that's a pretty good place to start. There were a lot of contributing factors to the way I was feeling at the time, and kind of culminated one night on the way to soccer training, and I was pulled over for speeding, and I thought I'd lost my license at that point, which, I realised wasn't the case after the fact, but that was kind of the last straw for me. And so I trained and got in the car after training, and I made the decision consciously to take a road home that was it was a gravel road that was the shortcut to getting back to mum and dad's. But I'd never gone down that road and not lost control of my car. And that was during the day at low speed. And so I knowingly went down that road on the way home in the dark, knowing that I might not get home. And thankfully, that didn't play out that way. I did lose control of the car. I ended up on an embankment, and had to call mum and dad to come and pick me up, which was confusing. And then, I think we all realised what had happened there. But thankfully, it was kind of a wake-up call in a way. That.
How did they respond to that?
I don't remember there being any real discussion about it. There might have been. I can't recall if there was. There was definitely concern and
with the anxious avoidant couple.
Yeah, and not really knowing what to do with it. It was so far removed from anything any of us had any experience with. It's and it was just such a hopeless situation. And I'm just glad that it panned out the way that it did instead of the way that it could have. And things improved, thankfully, just kind of as a consequence of timing of the job. Really helped give me something to focus on, and something that I could develop in and get better at and enjoyed. And I moved out of home shortly after getting the job as well, and so there was this new independence and having to work out the world from that point of view as well. So, there were a lot of things that happened off the back of that helped things improve.
Well, what a story.
Yeah.
How do you feel telling it on live radio?
I'm not really thinking about that at the moment. It's just, again, it's a story that probably needs to be told. I've written about it, so that makes me able to talk about it. I have processed it. I've had conversations with mum and dad about it. This isn't just on a whim. It is part of the story that forms the reason that I'm here today.
If your situation then is really still very common now for men and boys, do you think anything's changed in terms of support and pathways to managing?
I like to think so, yeah. I think,
do you know so?
I don't know so. I haven't looked into it in that much detail.
But men that are coming to see you must be able to talk about what they think they have access to or what the options are.
Yeah, and they've had varying degrees of success and experience with that. I have worked with a lot of guys that have made efforts to reach out to support systems in the past and they haven't gone well. I've had those experiences myself where I've reached out to organisations and it hasn't given me what I needed. And so, it's a big step to take that step again. I feel like that's something that I bring to my practice. That is, there's an element of like, if this is a good experience for this person and they then disengage, then at least it's not a barrier to entry next time. And even the mentoring work at the moment is like, this is an extension of mental health support for these kids, and if they have a positive experience with it, then that will make them more inclined to reach out at some point down the track when they come across their next challenge. I feel like the mentoring, the organisations that are out there that are doing amazing work particularly around men's health, I feel like we've come a long way, but I still think that there are big barriers for a lot of men.
It's clear, isn't it? Given male suicide rates aren't declining, they're only rising, and they occupy just about all of the suicides. So if that's not decreasing, then what are we missing? I think you've answered some of that already in your discussion. I think, I have ideas as well around, different approaches to not trying to, men aren't a being that needs fixing.
No.
Boys are in desperate need of being raised in a way that they can, we talk about mentors and support for boys, but we have to actually be able to teach boys to be able to do that for themselves, to be their own champions, to be their own internal mentors and role models, because if they're not role modelling off themselves, then it's very difficult just to impose somebody over the top of them at a certain age when things have gone way too far.
Yeah.
And things are broken, because once things are broken, it's very difficult to stick them back together again.
Yeah, and trying to undo damage is a really difficult thing to do. And giving people the healthy option, access to healthy options, is a big part of that.
Yeah. Or raising little boys, really little boys, give them a sense of purpose, and that can look like, responsibility in the home.
Yeah.
That is not child abuse.
No. Yeah.
That is actually, the attitude of, oh no, they're only little. Oh no, they are busy with school. Oh no, they've got soccer. No, they need a sense of purpose. Women, we have an inbuilt sense of purpose. Whether we activate it or not, it's there. Men don't have that.
Yeah. And a lot of that comes from play. Like, I think, independent play and the research around that recently is there's some remarkable stuff that's coming out of that. Give the autonomy. Don't, provide the opportunities for that independence and that exploration, and supervise from a distance and allow them to work it out for themselves.
That's right.
Yeah. Because
then that's all about you, isn't it? If you have to be jumping in and directing, then you're probably not, as you said, allowing that space for independence and self-exploration and curiosity, most of all.
Yeah.
and giving permission for boys to care for themselves without ridicule, because that is still a really big thing.
Yeah, and allow them to make decisions and get the feedback and see the consequences, and know that you're there, obviously, to support that and provide the structure to facilitate that. But let them explore. I heard something recently that was like you satisfy your own self-esteem by robbing your children of theirs.
Yes, that's a good one.
So it's like, it's going to make you feel uncomfortable in giving them that space, perhaps, and allowing them to learn those skills. But the short-term pain for long-term gain, it'll pay off down the track.
I think that's so true of raising teenagers as well, that we project onto them what we want for them and how we want it to be, because we've got not very good memories about what that was like. Because going through puberty, the single most biggest change a human being will ever experience, every part of you is changing, not to mention the growth bit. So kids will sleep a lot. They will eat a lot.
Yeah.
They will not be able to make sense of their emotions. They won't be able to regulate all of those things that we get onto kids about.
Yeah.
The most important thing for us is that they've got a clean room and that they've got all their homework done on time and stop eating everything in the house and get out of bed. Look at it through a different lens to go, wow, that's really hurting them, and it's so confusing and painful to go through puberty. That's a time when they need all the love and care and respect and nurturing from you. And
the support there that's unconditional.
Yeah.
I think a lot of parents would like to be in a position where if their child was in some sort of strife, that they would be the first person they'd call. And it's like, okay, how do you create an environment where and a relationship that facilitates that? And knowing that you trust your kids to make the right decisions, that's something.
But also trust that they won't.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
And let it be okay.
It's okay.
Yeah. And how you react when they don't is a big part of that.
Respond.
Yeah.
React.
Yeah, exactly. And, I'm saying this as a parent to an 8-month-old, so time will tell whether this is actually a thing for me, but, best intentions and all that. But, there's a lot in it. And, don't repeat the same mistakes, for want of a better term. If you haven't had a great experience, understand that and try to come up with a way that you can give your kids a better one.
Well, that's right, because just because stuff happens to you and how you feel about it, I commonly say to people, it's not your job to make your kids into who you want them to be based on your experiences. It's your job to help them into who they already are.
Yeah. Yeah.
I look at my own kids, I've got a 30-year-old, a 27-year-old and a 16-year-old. But they're all different. And, even the way Rose is raising Evelyn she's an amazing mum. But I wouldn't do it all the same way.
Yeah.
But I respect the way that she's doing it, because she's doing it really, really well.
Yeah.
And she's, my granddaughter is actually the greatest granddaughter that ever lived, with the only name called Evelyn.
Yeah, I'm sure my mum would disagree, but that's okay.
We can still go to a break if you like. We're sort of midway into the next segment, but seems like a good time to have another crack at the very special guest song request.
Yep.
So you remember how it works? Mm-hmm. Here's your next clue. When you've lost your sunglasses and they're on your head.
I can't even remember which song. Oh, you've done all the dumb things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Good old Paul Kelly and Dumb Things.
Great track.
Does that bear significance for you?
Yeah, I think the beauty of the song is, it comes across as lighthearted, but really it's a confession of sorts, right? It's, hey, I've done a whole lot of things and I get it. I'm not making excuses. It's, but it's been a ride at the same time. So forgive me, but it's been fun.
Well, here it is. It's Dumb Things by Paul Kelly. We'll be right back. You're listening to 94.1 FM. Here we go. It's Dumb Things. Welcome back. You're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC and you're joining us in the studio with Rae Bonney and Sean Menere. He's a counsellor, father, men's health advocate, and the creator of the Good Uncle Project, a brilliant initiative supporting young men through storytelling and connection, which we spoke about in the last segment, which just went way over. But that's all right, because I'm the boss of this show, so I can...
You make the rules.
I do. I don't even have to go to any breaks if I don't want to. Just give people a break so they can visit the bathroom.
That's it.
Yeah. Let's talk about grief while we're on this really sunny topic.
Sounds great. Yeah.
You've experienced not only loss yourself, but loss of close friends.
Mm-hmm.
How have those losses shaped you?
This might be a bit hard. They have given me a perspective that wouldn't have been available otherwise, right? Like, you lose mates in your 20s and 30s, and that gives you an opportunity to have a look at life and how precious it is and how little time that we have, and that can change the way, and it has changed the way that I look at things. I realise that, and I used to have this massive fear of death, and I don't even know where it came from. Like, I mean, it sounds normal, right? But like, it's inevitable. Talking about it kind of helps normalize it. But I lost a very, very good friend of mine, and like, he was 32, and we trained as air traffic controllers together. We formed this amazing bond, as you do in the crucible that is that kind of training environment. And he was this larger than life, big Kiwi boy, like rugby player, just no fear, just amazing human and amazing air traffic controller. And we eventually ended up working together in Sydney for a few years before he took the plunge and threw his hat in the ring for a job in Dubai. And so him and his lovely wife took the plunge, cut the cord, so to speak, and ventured out into the Middle East. And they'd only been there a couple of years a couple of months, and he started to have some health issues, and I was in regular contact and was a bit concerned with the testing and things that they were going on, and he eventually disclosed the fact that they were testing for cancer, and it turned out that he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer pretty soon after that all started. And there was just this unbelievable sense of confusion, and as I say, this guy that was just, he was a Superman, and then he gets told he's got 6 months to live, and there's no way you can make sense of that. And I didn't really know what to do with that. And I had a chat to a couple of my course mates at the time, and I'm like, hey, do you reckon if we kind of asked around work, we might be able to raise some funds for him? And they jumped on board, obviously, and I remember setting up the GoFundMe page, and I said to the other guys, like, what limit do you want? What kind of number do we put on this? I said, should we start with like $5,000? Like, is that too much? And one of them was like, oh, just put 10 on it, see what happens. I was like, okay. So I was kind of driving this GoFundMe page for Andy, and was just overwhelmed by the generosity that we're on the receiving end of. And you put a request out there, you frame it as coming from the human that he was, and you appeal to the community that he was part of, and I remember we let it run for, I don't know, maybe a month, just to accumulate some sort of balance. It went way past the number we'd set on it. And we had anonymous donations for people for hundreds of dollars just out of nowhere. And it was like, blew my mind. And knowing that they was kind of, Andy's wife is Swedish, so they moved from the Middle East back to Sweden to have access to to the healthcare and her family support and things over there. And I remember messaging Andy and I said, can you send me a bank account number? We've passed the hat around at work and I've got something to send through. And that was, that was enough in itself. He was pretty surprised. Then I waited the 3 days for the money to clear in his account, and the phone call I received was one that will stay with me forever. I think at that point we deposited maybe 30 grand in his account, and by the time we closed the page, it had tapped, or it was just under 50. And that gave him access to some experimental therapy based out of Latvia, some kind of aggressive immunotherapy treatment. And so I'd planned a big... my long service leave was coming up. We were planning to go to Latin America for 6 months, and it was kind of getting close to that. And I knew Andy wasn't well. And I made the decision to get to Sweden for a week because it just felt like I needed to do that. And we went over there, and they'd fallen pregnant, and they'd bought a house, and they were renovating that, and we got to spend a week with Andy and Lynn and their family. And I remember walking into the hospital room, and Lynn, his wife, had picked us up from the train station, and he had no idea we were turning up. I will never forget the look on his face when we walked into the hospital room. It was like the single best thing I could have ever done. And so we got this quality time together for that week, and just hanging out, not really talking about what was coming next, just reminiscing and being mates. And I remember when we left, I remember thinking I might not see him again. And we were in Cuba when we got the news that Andy had passed away, and that was pretty isolating, because you just, you're dealing with everything that goes with that, and then not being able to get home, and having lost this amazing part of your life. And it came down to a question that I have asked myself a number of times since then: what would Andy do? And he would have been filthy if we'd abandoned the trip just to get back to the memorial that they were having for him. And so we kicked on. And it obviously affected, where I was at the time, and the grief took some time to play out. But it changed me. I think you having gone through that experience, I can't look at life the same way. I don't value the things that I used to, and I value different things instead, which I'm happy about. Because everything is so fragile, and we don't get time back, and it's how do I make the most of it?
There's just so much in that story. Mm-hmm. But the thing that's front and centre in it, you're part of that story. You made that story happen the way it did, and it's very similar to the story about Rose in the hairdressing.
Yeah.
I think it's, you put things together in life and they make something else, and it can often, like this in this instance, make something really powerful. And it's not about money; it's about the gesture and about the kindness and care of human beings, including yourself, that really bring such incredible significance to a person's life, no matter how long they're here for.
Yeah, I think the crazy full circle moment that came from that was that the medication Andy had left over, Lynn donated it to a melanoma patient who was going through treatment at the moment, and it cleared things up entirely for that person.
Wow.
So, to go from something that was untreatable to this guy's walking around like it was kind of mental the way that played out. So yeah, it made a difference. Not
Are you
that
still
it was
in contact with her?
Yeah. She's so she gave birth to Alexander. Andy passed in October. Alexander was born in January, from memory. And we went and visited them a little while later. And she's since remarried. She's given birth to twin boys to her new partner. It's just, it's an amazing story. And it's so great to see them loving life and doing their thing. So, but it's just the most unimaginable pain at the same time. And knowing, and the grief element, I guess, being familiar with it in such an acute way, being able to see it when it arises in other elements of my life, I think has been really powerful as well. Because I can identify, those transitionary phases where there is a loss of sorts, whether it's a person, whether it's a job, a element of your identity or a relationship. The themes are the same. The intensity might not be the same, but being able to identify it, goes a long way to processing it.
Yeah, wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's, as I said, there's so much in that to take away and really think about. But you mentioned travel in there as well. Yeah. The Antarctica. What took you there twice? It's lots of birds and and not a lot of rain. That was appealing.
There was this bucket list thing, I think, back in the day to get to all 7 continents. So I think that was always, there in the back of my mind. But one of the controllers that I worked with in Cairns years ago had gone down to Antarctica with the Australian Antarctic Division as a radio operator. And I remember thinking at the time, that would be epic. And so it was just this thing that would have been amazing. Then to get down to Ushuaia and at the base of South America on the trip that I mentioned, and kind of see the boats leaving from there on the tourist trips that they do down to the Antarctic Peninsula. It was like, if we'd timed this better, we might have been able to take advantage of one of these. And so I looked into doing the cruise thing as well. And then my marriage ended, and it was an opportunity for that to be very real. So I applied for the same job, the radio operator job.
What year was this?
This was, I think it was just off the back of COVID. So it might have been 2020. 2021. And so I applied for the job 2 years running and got radio silence. Like nothing happened. And then the third year in a row, I remember thinking, am I going to do this again? And I had an hour left before the deadline for the application, and I nonchalantly threw in an application that was basically like, hey, I'm here, like I can do all the things you want, I'm probably worth having a conversation with. And I know they gave me like 2,500 word limit, and I think I was lucky to get 800 of those out and just pulled the trigger on. But apparently it got their interest. So I went with, like, I'd gone by the book the couple of years beforehand, and I was like, I need to give them a bit of my personality, and I threw that in there, and who would have thought it worked? And so, I kept getting through the selection process with the Antarctic Division, which was extensive. I think there were 14 or 15 stages to it. And during the same period of time, I was like, well, I've had this air traffic control career, and like, I know that this is, has facilitated me having access to this opportunity, but what am I going to do? Like, because they weren't going to give me the leave.
How long was the
stint? Was 4 months, but I needed to be available for 6. So, and hey, they'd given people leave in the past to make it happen. So I was like, well, there's a chance. But I also had to be okay with the fact that they might not, and what was I going to do with that? So in the end, and I was quite transparent, I was like, hey, if I get this, I'm out of here. Like, I gotta go. This wasn't something I sprung on them. And yeah, in the end, I got the job, which blew me away, because, hey, it was a dream realised. It was a twice in a lifetime opportunity, as it turns out. But yeah, work weren't gonna let me go. So I made the decision that they didn't have a say in it, basically. Like, I wasn't going to let this opportunity pass. So I said goodbye to an entire career to facilitate a 4-month job, basically, because that was more important to me than the certainty of the next however many years in that industry. And I remember talking to one of the guys I worked with leading up to it, and kind of just trying to work my head around it. And I remember him saying, I'm you in 20 years. And I said, no offense, but I gotta go. Like, I'm not sticking around for that long. Like, I can't allow my life to be dictated by anyone else, really. Like, I can't give that power away to somebody else. And I don't know what I'm going to do off the back of this, but again, it comes back to the belief that I'll find a way to make it work. So, and the thing that kept coming back to me that was probably the most common question that I got asked by other controllers was, look, what are you going to do if you can't come back to this? And it was this idea that if I couldn't be a controller, I couldn't be anything else. And then I started to have some fun with it. I was like, well, whatever I want. Like, I'll have this freedom that isn't attached to this place anymore. That isn't attached to this identity. And, you know, part of that was available was going through COVID and not having any aeroplanes to play with, and being like, okay, well, who am I if I am not an air traffic controller? Like, that was a question that I asked myself, because in that moment I wasn't.
Because you mentioned earlier in the show that you started, you know, at Virgin Blue, sort of in customer service, and worked your way all the way up to that position.
Yeah.
Did that sort of, like, was that your identity?
Massively, yeah. And there was this strange positive feedback loop that tapped into it, right? Like, I did this thing, I did it well, I got paid well for it, and so that, yeah, it felt good. Like, it tapped into my ego. I was able to find flow at work, which is a beautiful thing, right? Like, when things are running hot and you're running hot and you're making it work and you're enjoying it and you're just seeing it in slow motion, and it's just this beautiful problem-solving element that really taps into the things that I enjoy. And then you see real-time feedback of it working, and so, again, it positively reinforces what you're doing. And then, and then there's this ego element that's massive in it as well, because if you're not confident as a controller, you can't be a controller. Like, it's in the word. Like, yes. You need to control everything, and that doesn't translate to real life very well either. And that I didn't realize until life kind of fell apart that was going on.
Yeah.
But when you were in the zone, like, God, there's fewer better feelings than that.
Yeah.
But then, like, it kind of ran its course. I'd done everything that they were going to let me do. Like, I'd applied for and been successful at achieving, like, other jobs within the environment, but because of resourcing, they weren't letting me move. So I had to make that decision for myself, let go of the financial security, the identity, and everything else that went with it, and went, okay, well, let's work out what the next thing looks like.
So what was the first stint like?
It was...
And what did you do there?
So, like, it was pretty rough, actually, because we went from one quarantine to another. Like, we had to, because it was kind of the first season post-COVID, we went through some fairly, rigorous testing protocols, because no one was going down to Antarctica if you had COVID. So you're kind of under a self-imposed lockdown in Hobart pre-departure. And they'd accumulated so much snow down there the first season we went down that they were madly trying to clear a runway down there. And they were, I think, 250,000 tonne worth of snow they had to clear to get a serviceable runway up and running. And so eventually the military kind of came in and said, yeah, look, we'll, and they're part of it every season, but they went, yeah, we can operate with 1,000 metres worth of runway in this massive C-17 cargo flight. And so we got down there after 7 weeks delayed in Hobart, and I remember the back door of that C-17 opening up and it just white as far as the eye can see, and you're just like, wow, I made it.
What was the purpose of you being there?
So we were there to basically support the science work that's being done down there. So there's trade teams and everything that go down there every summer, and to support the science work and all the research teams and scientists are coming down there for the summer, because that's when you get the weather windows where you can get out there and do the things and get all the maintenance work done to the stations down there and all of that sort of stuff. And then summer wraps up and they keep a skeleton team down there over the winter to keep the lights on, and then summer ramps up again and it goes guns blazing again for a few months. And
so you're doing things that you hadn't done before?
Yeah. And, I was trained up to be a field trip leader, so I could take groups of people off station and things like that, which was amazing, because you're down there, as much as you're down there for this amazing experience.
Like really glorified scouts.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. You getting away from the station and getting into that nothingness is talk about perspective. You realise how insignificant you are in the scheme of things, which is a great part of it. And you're interacting with people that you'd never normally interact with. You've got... these scientists that are researching things that blow your mind, you're just having conversations with them around dinner. It was great. So
I guess everyone there is there because they really, really want to be, because it's not easy to get there.
Yeah. And for a lot of these science teams particularly, they've been working for years to get grants and get their research to where it needs to be, and there's this whole opportunity for them. So,
any major discoveries occur on your watch?
None that I can talk about. No, it was just great to see. As I said, first season post-COVID, there were a lot of things that were great to get up and running again, and a lot of it was building for the second season so that those projects could be taken a step further. So, to be part of that setup first season, and then to go back the second season to see it play out the way that you kind of put in the work to help support it the first season was a really...
So how did you get back for the second time?
So I got back to Melbourne. I'd managed to secure a job while I was away, and kind of did some internal consulting work for a technology company that was still attached to the ATC world, and the Antarctic division came back to me fairly late in the piece that year and said, hey, are you interested in coming back? And I was like, yes. So I went to my new employer and I said, hey, I know I've just been here 6 months, but can I have 6 months off? And knowing that there was a precedent that I'd walk anyway, I think they came around to the idea pretty quickly. So they gave me the leave, and I went back for a second time. So, which changed my life again.
Yeah. Was it different second time?
Yeah, so I went down I was on the first flight down there, so it was great because the winter crew that I'd left at the end of the first season, we were the first ones to see them at the start of the second season. So there was this reunion of sorts, which was great. And then I was down there for the whole season, but it's also where I met my partner.
Oh.
And we came back with little Evie, so...
So she was conceived there.
Yeah.
Trying to get warm.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah. So,
golly.
Yeah, and it changed my life in a lot of ways. The first time and the second time. The first time, as a segue out of that industry, and the second time for a whole bunch of different reasons. So, which has been amazing.
What a nice round off. I would not have seen that happening, because I think we've maybe got about 3 minutes before we do some other stuff. Yeah. But there was a freak weightlifting accident as well that occurred during your life. That was what is it life-changing in your life?
Yeah,
really?
There's been a bit. I
thought that's where you were heading when you said, it was life-changing. You got down there and got on the weights with your mates.
No, the weightlifting thing, look, that was... that happened during COVID, actually. I met one of my neighbours. She'd bought a gym set up, and so we could train in the car park, and she's this international record holder and this amazing woman in herself, and so she had the full setup, and I was like, hey, I'm Sean, can I train? And yeah, so we established this great friendship and training routine, because that was pretty much all we had to do. And in the midst of that, I ended up dislocating my wrist. I had 100 kilos basically come down on my wrist at one point, with about a couple of weeks left of lockdown. And it all happened so fast that, I went into the ED and got the x-ray done, and the doctor put the x-ray on the light box thing, and his words were, "I've never seen one of these before," and you never want to be that guy in the hospital.
Oh, that face. So
they pretty much wrote off any kind of recovery that was available. So that became a real mental barrier to have to overcome, in that they said, look, you're probably never going to be able to do push-ups again. The functionality in your right hand's probably not going to be there. And I was like, hang on a second, what? Speak of grief, like I've just lost my right hand. Like, what do I, it's,
And you're right-handed.
Yeah. So, but also they never took the time to work out where I was coming from and what I was capable of. So I decided that I was going to do better than that. So I spent the next 2 years rehabbing the injury and got it back to where I wanted it to be. So
it's all good now?
It's all good now, yeah.
No pain?
There's discomfort regularly, but it reminds me that it's there. And it's pushing through the discomfort regularly, which is just a constant exercise.
Yeah. It's amazing. Human beings are the most adaptable species on the planet, and we forget that sometimes. Yeah,
and even with, it was a real exercise in listening to all of the information that was available, but also gathering my own information and understanding myself well enough to know that, hey, if anyone was going to be able to get a good result out of this, that was me.
Yes.
Because I wasn't going to sit back and wonder if I should have done more. And the thing that changed the game for me was, if I get a better result out of this than what they think is possible, then the next person to walk in the door with this injury has that available to them, because they've seen someone else.
Were they surprised at your...
Yeah, I'm a nightmare patient, for good and bad reasons. Like the physio, I remember the physio that I got, who was the head of the department, because it was an interesting injury. The first time I met her, I was like, can I do more? And she was like, hang on, what? No one does their exercise, and you want to do more? Hang on a second, who are you? And so I was constantly sending him information and videos of stuff I was doing, and I'm like, hey, is this working? And then every time I go into the physio and get treated and was making progress, and I was like, yeah, look, I'm beyond motivated here. And so, when I actually hit a personal best on a lift that broke me 40 weeks post-surgery.
Jeez.
And that was a game changer.
Yeah.
That was,
So that old people-pleasing habit dissipated pretty fast when your mobility was on the line? Yeah,
it's like the people-pleasing's trumped by, you can't tell me I can't do that. So if you're going to say that's not possible, I'm going to give it a run and work that out for myself. That tenacity, I think, built pretty heavily through that. But the mental game was bigger than the physical game there. There's a difference between pain and discomfort. It's like, where is that for me? Where is that physically? Where is that mentally or emotionally? And where can we lean into it? Because there's no way, you got to go through it. The conditioning that was available on so many levels there, that was life-changing. But in
the wash-up of what you have disclosed to us today, there's just been, every segment of your life has involved some kind of obstacle or challenge for you to emotionally and physically navigate on your own terms. Sounds like you pretty much worked out when you're that little kid in the schoolyard, you're on your own.
Yep.
And there's supports around us, but ultimately when we're facing things like that, we are on our own, and to dig deep to find out what our resilience is. I mean, you can't learn resilience in a boardroom, unfortunately.
No.
It comes from, experiences like you've described for us today.
Yeah, and there's a very conscious decision around what are you going to do with it, right? You can be the victim. You can use this as an excuse in the future for why you can't do things now, or you can do something else. And it's up to you. You have ultimate authority over your decision-making process.
Yeah.
That's such a powerful thing to get hold of, because it's my responsibility. Everything that has got me here is my fault.
Yeah. Well, it's new. It's
in a way.
You're the common denominator.
Yeah. But also whatever happens next is up to me as well.
Yes.
And so knowing that, you're like, okay, I can work with that, right? I'm not going to blame anyone else, because everyone is influenced by others, but ultimately it's up to us.
I mean, that said, there are people who live in countries of the world where there are very limited choices about safety and security.
Absolutely.
And we happen to live in probably, here in Melbourne, one of the luckiest spaces on the planet.
Yeah.
Where we can choose those things mostly.
Yeah, and knowing, like you said before, knowing that they're available is a big part of that, and having access to them and being able to reach out and go, hey, I need this now. How can I work this to my advantage? And
you just create so many beautiful segues for me, because the next thing I did want to say was that if any of the themes and topics we've discussed today have brought up uncomfortable feelings for you, remember we do have pretty good support here in Australia.
Yeah.
It's about options. Not everything works for you, but try some. Lifeline here, the number there is 131114. If you don't connect with the person that you first speak to, just hang up and ring back until you find somebody that does resonate.
Yeah.
Beyond Blue, same thing, 1300 22 4636. Men's line in Australia, 1300 789978, and 1800 Respect as well. They do very good work with men and women. Anyone who rings their line is 1800 737 732. Now today signifies the final day of Men's Health Week 2025. In my involvement in men's health for many years, I think every year we get so much better at signifying International Men's Health Week and International Men's Day, and this one has surpassed all of the others, and it's thanks to people like you, and I'll take some credit myself of really pushing the boat out and putting things in people's faces that they normally would not be thinking about. So it's not all about just reach out, have a beer with your mate. In fact, don't have a beer with your mate. Alcohol is one of the biggest killers of men. I think we need to get over that one. Nothing wrong with having a beer with your mate, but it's not the only thing to do.
Circumstances, yeah.
That's right. So this year has surpassed all the others by way of global involvement and recognition for creating a better world for men and boys. Here in Australia, we're making. I think we are one of the world's leaders, I think, in supporting men and boys. I know it probably doesn't feel like it all the way, but hopefully some of the new initiatives will get some traction. And the first one, the Australian government just appointed Dan Rapakali, and I think that's how you pronounce it, as the first special envoy for men's health, where his job will be to spotlight the unique health challenges faced by Australian men and boys and to drive policy changes, which is probably one of my biggest hobby horses. Is we need to address men and boys' health through policy here in Australia and around the world. Hopefully his role will end up in having the very first Minister for Men here in Australia, because we don't have one.
Fingers crossed, yeah.
In the lead up to the election this year, also both the Labor and government and the coalition pledged $32 million in dedicated men's health funding, and this included $16 million for men's sheds, which is great because Tony Fidelani was just telling me his men's shed up here in Doncaster is riddled with asbestos. They can't get anything for it. Gosh, just use some of that bloody $16 million. Get Tony a new shed. $8 million for Movember's suicide prevention programs. Movember are doing really well in pushing out into the policy space. If they were known for prostate cancer in the very early days and a little bit about mental health, now they're sort of getting into the spaces with all the money that they've raised to really make a difference at that policy end of town. There's some other, another $8 million for broader men's health initiatives as well, which is really cool, especially around the public health network. You described before about educating people. Men are biologically different. men are very high risk taking in their behaviours. You know, biologically, men are not predisposed not to seek help or show emotion. They are. We just don't show them how to do it. So we have to be able to create better environments, meet men where they are, and have men feel that sense of dignity and pride preservation when they're moving through services. Yeah,
absolutely.
But unfortunately to date, and despite men accounting for a significant proportion of preventable health issues, the 2025 federal budget has allocated less than 2% of the $1.4 billion health funding to men's health initiatives since 2022, so that last 3 years. Now, that disparity, it's not about women, it's just about underscoring men's health concerns aren't being efficiently or effectively addressed. So there's a lot to celebrate, but we really need to stay on focus for better funding to match the scale of the need, stronger inclusive policies that serve men alongside other populations, male-friendly services that men can actually engage with, and leadership that acts across communities, workplaces and government. I came during one of my Men's Health Week events this week that I was speaking at. I did come across a politician, and I said to the politician, "Hey, this is what I do." Mm-hmm. And the politician said, "Oh, great." And I said, "How do you feel about the appointment of Dan Rapakali?" And their immediate response was, "What about women?" And women have been absent from any of our medical research for hundreds of years. What about menopause? And I said, those things are really important. However, I'm speaking about men. And this politician would not have the conversation about men in any way, and started talking about the wage gaps. And not with no disrespect to this person, but that's where we're still at. Mm-hmm. There's this real avoidance and resistance to even speaking about men's health as an inclusive thing. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the suicide rates, you can't fake those stats because they're actually dead. Can't fake that one.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie.
No. So if it's only that, if you're a mother, father of a boy, then if something like that happened to one of your children, then you would care.
Yeah, and it's something we need to care about. It's affecting all of us.
Well, it does. Yeah. You lose a friend. Cancer. One of the biggest killers of men. Heart disease kills more men than anyone else in the world. Yeah. Men die of more cancers than anyone else in the world. Go on and think about, the last week, three boys with anorexia, really so severe that they're hospitalised and one of them may not live. Yeah, we don't talk about it.
No, we and that's it's normalising these conversations, and because it helps with the feeling of isolation that's there otherwise. Yeah,
so care about everybody.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah.
So speaking of gratitude. And coming up next is the divine Paula Hogg. She's rolling out an entire lazy Sunday afternoon of music and banter, bound to get you relaxed and probably warm as well, because I don't know what the temperature is, but we have reached the beautiful chilliness of Melbourne. I haven't taken my fur off, all segment.
Yep.
Or the whole show. I'm also happy to share that all these shows, the one you've listened to today, are available for listening anytime, anywhere on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and their original home at YouTube.
Nice.
Which is pretty that's exciting. Pretty great. It's come a long way in the many years that I've been here. Yeah. I think I didn't even record the shows to begin with, and they may not have been worth recording.
Right. Well,
I don't know.
Let's hope this one was.
Hopefully we've come a long way since then.
Yeah.
But now for your final song, Sean.
Okay.
We've got two left. Did you notice we did drop one? I
did. That's all right.
But you shouldn't. I was going to say you shouldn't need a cryptic clue, but I will give you one. But before I do, I want to say a huge thank you to you, Sean. And Paula has arrived in the studio. Thank you, and interrupted that. But thank you, Sean. Menere.
Thank you, Rae,
for joining me today. Your honesty, your warmth, your stories just I probably don't have words to describe how I feel about that, and probably will have to sit for the rest of the day just absorbing, your face and your words, because they're ever so powerful.
Thank you. Thanks for holding space for it and facilitating the conversation.
Well, you are creating real change, and if it's only one person, but I'm sure it's many, many others who, you've made a big change in your life in the support of others.
Thanks, Rae. Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
It's important, yeah.
So, the final clue is, in fact, birds.
Yep.
What would that be?
Yeah, well, I mean, Birds by... Oh, that's the song.
Actually, no, that's not even the clue.
You've given me the answer.
The clue is flight, right? The clue is flight, because the song is by Imagine Dragons. Mm-hmm. A group of dragons is called a flight.
There you go.
And birds in flight. How do you go? Can't believe I messed that one up.
No, it's good. It's a good song to end on. Yeah.
Well, everybody, until I see or hear or whatever I'm doing next month, I don't know who the next guest is. I can't remember. But take care, and remember, just be kind, just be caring. Don't be an asshole, because it can kill people, honestly.
Good tip.
Yeah, it's a good tip. Here we go. Here's the Birds. Bye. Imagine Dragons.